Jewish rabbis, Texas cows, and the threat of World War III, a quiet little passage in Numbers 19 has stoked modern political tensions throughout Israel and the entire Middle East. Today we will examine the ashes of the Red Heifer. Welcome to the Shalom Y'all Ministries podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Keim, along with my dear friend, Dr. Daniel McCabe. Daniel, you have a trip to Israel coming up in May, Lord willing, of course. Are you excited?
Well, of course, I'm very much excited to go to Israel anytime I get a chance. But this trip, I'm going with my middle son. I was able to go a couple of years with my oldest son, but this time I'm going with my middle son, Jake, and some other young friends. So we'll have to be in our best physical shape to keep up with these young ones this time. But I am looking forward to it. Some new things I want to do, as always trying to do new things. And I know you've got your bucket list of places you want to see. So it's the same way for me. I'm ready to go.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, and I know the makeup of the trip participants, and yeah, you're going to have several young ones running circles around you the whole time, I do suspect.
Yeah, I definitely will. But that's good because it definitely keeps you young.
Yes, of course. Well, we here at Shalom Y'all truly believe that a walk through the land deepens your walk with the Lord. And really, what could be more important than that? Our mission is to teach and encourage those who love the Bible, the land of the Bible, and of course, the people of the land. Our hope is that you, our listeners, can travel throughout the Holy Land with us someday. So please be sure to reach out for more information on how that can happen for you or your group when the time is right. Now, before Daniel leads us through our main subject matter of the ashes of the Red Heifer, I will begin with a mini topic. And today's mini topic, you better settle into your most comfortable position because I'm going to read an entire psalm. I don't know how much time you got, but it's only 3 verses. It's Psalm 131. It's a psalm of ascent of David. It's very short, but it is so profound. I love it because it communicates what I think might very well be the primary attribute of what it is to be a godly person. So David says this in Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord, from this time forth and forevermore. See, Psalm 131 is very special to me. It's not too long ago, actually, that we went through this in our college group at church. And I wasn't teaching that night, but the teacher that led us through it, of course, I've read this psalm many times before, but it really just hit me. I was like, wow, this is so profound in its simplicity. David is just putting pen to paper or stylus to stone or quill to, not vellum at the time, papyrus, whatever. He's writing. And David is writing. And what's pouring out of his heart is a lowly heart. He says, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. David was the king of Israel. David was the man after God's own heart. David did many wonderful things that God used him for. He knew a lot of stuff, very wise, very wealthy, very powerful, very godly. But his heart was not lifted up and his eyes were not raised too high. He was a humble man. Of course, we know his failures. We know when he did act in his pride, as everyone gets trapped up in pride every now and then, some more than others. But really what it is to be a godly person is to have your heart laid low, to be humbled before God. He said, I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. as deep as I know, Daniel, you and I like to really plumb the depths of Scripture. We like to think philosophical thoughts. We like to try to know as much as we possibly can about God, but we also know there's only so much we can know. We are created, we are finite, and there are many things that will forever be beyond our comprehension. Even when we're in heaven, even when we're in the kingdom and in the new earth for 10 quadrillion years, we still have a limit of how much we can comprehend. God will always be infinitely beyond us. And David, not disinterested in weightier matters, of course, he just said he does not occupy himself with things too great and too marvelous for me. I think what he's saying there is God is forever beyond me. He's infinitely beyond me. I'm not going to try to strive beyond my station. I'm not going to occupy myself with the things that are impossible for me to figure out anyway. I'm going to let God be God, and I'm going to let me just be finite, created me. Then he draws a metaphor here, which is interesting to me. He says, I've calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. And Daniel, I think there's probably a couple different ways we can take this. Either David's emphasis is on the weaned part of the weaned child, that, as a small child is weaned off of his mother's milk. Maybe David is thinking about something he's been weaned off of. And in the context of humility, he's probably talking about he's been weaned off of the pride of life. He's been weaned off of the pursuits that are common to man in this world, and he's come to a point where he's figured it out and said, you know what, I just need to slow down and humble myself and just live as quietly in my soul as I possibly can. We're not born humble. We're born very, very prideful. And I think the progress, I think there's a progress of humility. There's things you need to start denying in order to become humble. You need to deny prideful pursuits and the pursuits of the world and the things that might lift me up and draw my attention and occupation away from the Lord. We need to move beyond those things into humility. Another way to take this is, if his emphasis is not so much on the weaned part, but on the child with its mother part, really what that speaks to me is, we think of a small child who is so helpless without his or her mother. The child needs his mother in every way, shape, and form. The mother provides for him, protects him, sustains him. And like that kind of child, David is with God. He's just quietly submitting to what God would have for him and what God would deliver to him on a day-to-day basis. Now, I don't know exactly what was in David's mind, but both of those work for me.
You
At
think
any
that when
rate,
he
he was
mentions
like,
the weaned child, Adam, do you think that maybe he's using an expression that we would use today, like a toddler?
yeah, quite possibly, like just a little kid. And if he
Right.
is, I think the emphasis then is on the latter part. I'm a little toddler. I'm a little kid. And without my
Yeah.
mother, I'm helpless and I'm aimless and I really have nothing. I have no hope to survive another day
Right.
without
Right.
her. And I do lean towards that one. I don't have some rock solid
Mhm.
evidence for it, but that's just kind of what speaks to me is I think that David might be talking about, I'm a helpless little kid
Yeah.
before, that's how much I need the Lord. Like a little toddler needs its mother. And then he finishes so beautifully, O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. David is just thinking about his own humility, which is kind of funny. How do you know when you're succeeding at humility? Oh, I'm being pretty humble today. I take
Right.
pride in my humility. I'm doing pretty good at that. And Moses, of course, in the Pentateuch wrote, Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth. Okay. If you can objectively state that as fact, good for you. But
Well, I was thinking about that
humility
when
is
you
kind of one
said
of
it.
those funny things.
Yeah, when you said it at first, when he writes, "Lord, my heart is not haughty," I'm like, well, how would I say that? Would I say, "Lord, I
Yeah.
think that I'm not really being prideful here"? Because it's almost like if as soon as you say something real confidently like that, you're like, "Well, maybe." How do you know?
Yeah. Well, you said confidence, and there's a difference between prideful and confident, right?
Right.
I think a confidence could speak to an objective assessment. I can look back on my life ideally I would look back in my life and be able to say, I've been walking very humbly. And there have been times in my life where I've been encouraged of like, wow, I think I've been really humble before the Lord lately. And I try not to be prideful in that, because it is easy,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
do wrestle with the flesh and it's easy for us to fall into that pride. But I think there can be an objective assessment. And if there is one to be had, it probably is more the emphasis, not so much on, oh, my humility has been great lately, but just on the greatness of God. God, you are so high and lifted up. I need you so much. I truly am nothing without
Mhm.
you. I think if
Yeah.
our emphasis and focus is on the greatness of God, then we are probably doing a pretty good job in our humility. Funny
Mhm.
concept. But when David
It is.
says,
I
"Oh,
think maybe in
Israel,
our
hope in the
culture,
Lord."
I think in our culture, it's a little bit of a faux pas to say that you're not prideful, or I don't know.
Right. Nobody wants to hear
It is
that,
a
because
tricky
then their
one.
assumption is, oh,
Hmm.
yeah. It is tricky. But when he says, "Oh, Israel, hope in the Lord," I think he wants the same thing for Israel as what's going on in his own heart. Israel, hope in the
Yes.
Lord, need the Lord, realize that you shouldn't have the pride of life. You should be humble before God from this time forth and forevermore. That was David's prayer, that Israel would always,
Hmm.
into perpetuity, for all time, have this humility that he had. They struggled, as we all do. And I think today you'll be talking about a subject matter that has to do even with some future for Israel. So that's what I have for a mini topic, just a brief walk through Psalm 131. The Lord has laid it on my heart lately, and I just wanted to share David's humility with you, something for us to all aspire towards. I just ended a sentence with a preposition, and I shouldn't do that. But toward which we should all aspire.
Yeah, that was a fun
So,
study, Adam.
Daniel, what is
Thanks.
this month's? Yeah, good. I'm glad. I always love the Psalms, and Psalms of Ascent are just so beautiful. But what is this month's trivia question?
Well, let me give you the answers to the trivia question first. Okay, so I'm going to give you the answers, and I'm
Oh,
going to ask you. I want to ask you about the answers before I give you the question. You ready? So
hmm.
the answers
Okay.
to our trivia question are Ashdod, Beersheba, Haifa, and Nazareth. Okay, you got it?
Hmm.
Ashdod, Beersheba, Haifa, or Nazareth. Those are the answers. Now, those are all cities in Israel, of course. How many of those cities have you been to?
I have been to Nazareth, Beersheba. I have overlooked Haifa from Mount Carmel. You can look down
Okay.
to the north and see kind of the city. I've never been in the city. I've never been in Ashdod. I've actually never been to any of the 5 chief cities of the Philistines. Much to my deep dismay, I would love to visit them. Some would be much more dangerous than others today to go to.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I've been to Beersheba and Nazareth.
Okay. I'm going to be going to one of the other of the 5 Philistine cities in May, Gath, or at least the ruins of what people believe to be Gath. So that'd be fun. So 3 out of the 4. That's good. That's great. That's going to help you with this question. So it's a geography
Oh,
question,
okay.
as you can imagine, and if you're new to our podcast, you're going to learn that it's very hard to stump Adam on geography questions, and so I have to be very thoughtful to be able to pull a win out here against Adam in the trivia on geography. So, okay, so here's the question. Now that you know the answers, and of course there is just one of those is the only correct answer. So I'll ask the question. I'll give you the answers again, and then I'll give you time to think here in giving you the answer here at the end of our podcast. But here's the question: what is the third largest city in Israel behind Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? What is the third largest city in Israel behind Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? So Jerusalem is by far the largest city in Israel. Tel Aviv is by far the second largest city in Israel. But what is the third largest city? Is it Ashdod, Beersheba, Haifa, or Nazareth? And we'll have the answer for you later in the podcast. Well, Adam, you didn't grow up in Texas like I did. You grew up in the Midwest. Tell our folks where you're from.
Well, for first of all, I got here as fast as I could.
Yeah.
I grew up in Minnesota, spent almost 40 years there. So I grew up in Ain't, Texas, and then I got here to Texas when I was, well, around 40 years old.
Okay. Were you raised around any goats, sheep, or cows?
No, I was raised in the suburbs. I had
Okay.
extended family that farmed in southern Minnesota, and every now and then
Yeah.
we would visit their farm. And in Minnesota, the farms largely are crops, not so much animal. I mean, there is livestock, of course, and there are dairy farms and stuff, but most of it is just fields of crops. But we would every now and then visit my dad's cousins that would have some animals.
Okay. Well, you're definitely in ranch country now.
Yes,
For
yes, I
sure.
am.
Yeah, they're in Stephenville.
Yes.
And you are surrounded by dairy farms. So
Yeah.
maybe this is a good topic for you. But I wasn't raised around any of those either. I grew up in a small town, Longview, Texas, and we only had turtles. We had 3 turtles and 2 cats growing up. So that's the extent of my livestock knowledge. In fact, when it was when I first began to look over the chapter of interest for us today, which is Numbers 19, a number of years ago, and it mentioned a heifer in the passage. I had to look up the definition of the word heifer to be sure that I understood it, because I'm not, I'm a city boy. Like, do I have it right? What exactly technically is a heifer? And of course, the definition I ran across is that it's a young female cow that hasn't given birth to a calf. A young female cow that hasn't given birth to a calf. So there we go. We'll start with that. I do know a little bit about cows, having been raised in Texas, enough to know some names of some cows. If we were to do a back and forth game where I name a cow and you name a cow, how many cows do you think we could name before we could run out of cows? You and me, I don't know, but how about Herefords? You've heard of Hereford?
I've heard of it. I wouldn't be able to
Okay,
off the top of my
right,
head list you anything, but I'd guess
right,
that if you start naming me names of cows, I might have heard
okay,
of them.
okay. Brahmins,
I've heard of that.
Brahmins. Okay,
Yep.
Holsteins.
Okay, Holsteins.
And Longhorns, if you're a University of Texas
Oh,
fan.
hook 'em. Yep, hook 'em.
Yeah, well, I'm actually wearing a Texas A&M sweatshirt right now, even as we
Well, yeah, I'm employed
are
by the A&M
speaking.
system as
So
well, so I get
okay,
it for whatever.
and then of course there's Angus cows too. So I'm like you. I don't know if I could necessarily name too many cows. I do know there's different breeds of cows. Like for example, the Angus cow. There's a black Angus and a red Angus. I know that.
Can I tell you
According to beef, go ahead.
my favorite cows are, well, okay, we got porterhouse, you got filet, you got New York strip,
Yeah.
you got sirloin, you got those are my favorite.
You
Love them.
you like them flat, huh? You you
Yes,
like them on a plate. Okay.
I do.
Um, well, as I started to say a second ago, there's a magazine. I bet you and I didn't grow up reading, but it's called Beef Magazine.
Is that a
There
rappers
really is such a
magazine that
thing.
people have beef with each other or something?
No, it's actually what you would think. It's a magazine about the cow industry, I guess is the best way to put it. But according to Beef Magazine, approximately 15% of all cows are the color, drum roll please, red.
Hmm.
15% are red. Yeah. The rest, of course, are black, brown, white, or whatever. But the Red Angus breed in particular, that's the one we probably have heard, most people have heard before, Red Angus. But it originated sometime in the 18th century as the product of some cross breeding. I didn't read a lot about it, but enough to be able to tell you that. But there have been red cows of other breeds that have been around a long time, so they're not new. And they have a very distinct place in the story of the Bible. A red cow does. A story that could very well, as you said in our introduction, could very well ignite another regional or world war in the Middle East, or maybe even spill beyond that. And this could happen anytime. It really feels like we're on the edge sometimes of World War III. So just like you went through Psalm 133, I want to kind of direct our readers to Numbers 19, although I'm not going to take the time to read through the passage like you did. We're just going to kind of talk through it. But this is the passage in which we read the story of the ashes of the red heifer. A lot of people have heard about the ashes of the red heifer. Maybe some of our listeners have not, but we're going to have to begin our story. We'll have to go back to about 2,000 years ago, to about 40 years after Jesus died and rose from the grave. And so maybe folks know that around that time, or at that time, Rome controlled Jerusalem. During the time of Jesus, Rome was in charge, and we are familiar with their role in the story of the New Testament. We see, of course, the story of Pontius Pilate, and there are examples of centurions in the Gospels and things like that. But the people back in those days, they thought that when Jesus arrived in Jerusalem as Messiah, which we can read about at the ends of each gospel, but when Jesus arrived in Jerusalem as Messiah, they thought he was going to overthrow Rome and he was going to become the new Jewish king. And when Jesus didn't meet the expectations of the Jewish people, and then, of course, they crucified him, at that point, many of the people just sort of gave up on the idea that Jesus was their Messiah, and he had been crucified after all. So they're kind of moving on. But they, disillusioned by his death, they simply took it upon themselves then to overthrow Rome. If he's not going to do it, they're going to do it. But their efforts failed tragically when Roman legions marched on Jerusalem in 70 AD. They surrounded the Jewish rebels that had barricaded themselves in the city. They broke down the walls of the city and then set fire to the Jewish temple, called the Second Temple. I know that's a time period that you're pretty familiar with. You even been working on in times past. You've been kind of dabbling with a book about some of that history. Isn't that right?
Yes, I started a novel, and I would send you chapters as I finished them. And it's been so it's one of those. That's probably the classic writing a book story, right? I get to pretty much where I'm
Yeah.
almost done, and then I never finish. This has been years now.
Right.
I think I started
Yeah.
writing it towards the end of 2000. I'd be excited. I'd
Yeah.
send you chapters, and maybe over the course of a
Yeah.
year or so, and then I only
I
had a few
loved it.
chapters left. I thought it was kind of neat, and I'm thinking about what do I want to do to kind of tie up some of the ends, but leave it open for the next, because I was thinking a trilogy or something. But yeah, all that, it was about the conquering of Jerusalem from the Romans. And oh man, it's a fascinating history. I won't get into it now. The only random factoid of the day that I will give you about that is Josephus records the Roman general Titus, who would go on to be emperor, lamenting how bad things got within the city. Because when you siege a city, you're counting on the conditions getting so bad inside and the people getting so desperate that they just give up to you. When Titus took over, finally charged in to take over Jerusalem, he said something to the effect of, I have to save the city from itself. If I don't just come in and start knocking walls down and take it, the people will all slaughter each other. There's going to be nothing left. And apparently, according to Josephus at least, Titus's attitude was, it's getting so bad inside, I have to save the city from itself, so I have to take it over. That's the random factoid of the day about that.
Gotcha. Well, the story of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70 sounds like it's a whole long ways from Numbers 19, but I'm going to make the connection here. Okay, so when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, it was just a tragedy, and it ended any future opportunity for the Jews to bring their animal sacrifices to the temple anymore. It was just done, and they haven't been bringing their animal sacrifices to the temple since. But since that day in 70 AD, the Jews have been dreaming and praying and planning for a replacement temple, which they would call the third temple. So Solomon's temple would be the first, Herod's temple at the time of Jesus, which was sort of a refurbished Zerubbabel's temple, was called the second. And then this future temple was typically called the third temple. But even though they're dreaming about it, and some people are even planning the replacement temple in particular, only those who are ritually pure, according to Jewish law, only those who are ritually pure may build this temple. And that's a problem, because anyone who's walked through a morgue or visited a cemetery or attended a funeral over the last 2,000 years, what that does immediately, it takes them to a state of ritual impurity. And no one can say with confidence that they've never come into contact with the dead. We all have. So if every Jew is ritually unclean, as the Bible describes them, then how could they possibly build a third temple? It doesn't follow. Well, there's good news because fortunately, the law of Moses, back now again in Numbers 19, explains how one who has become ritually impure can be restored to purity. He or she must be sprinkled by the temple priest with spring water that has been mixed with the ashes of an unblemished red heifer.
Hmm.
Okay. But then that leads us to a second problem, doesn't it, Adam?
It sure
There are,
does.
yeah, because where are they going to find an unblemished red heifer? There's no existing ashes of a red heifer. They had some that lasted beyond the siege of Jerusalem in AD 70 for a while, but over time they eventually ran out. So they don't have any ashes of a red heifer. And how can they possibly participate in any biblically prescribed purification ceremony without them? So rabbis today, they're searching for an unblemished red heifer that can once again be used to purify those who seek to rebuild the temple and bring their sacrifices to it. Okay. Well, if you followed the
Good
news
plan.
over the last years, in 1997 was the first I can remember hearing anything about the ashes of the red heifer or anybody thinking that they were close to it. I remember hearing about it when I was a kid, didn't understand anything about it. But in 1997, rabbis who were associated with the Temple Institute in Jerusalem thought they found one. That would have been a remarkable thing. And it was touted there for a while as this great, amazing miracle that God had provided an unblemished red heifer until they realized later that it was disqualified. And then 5 years later in 2002, they thought they found another one, but it too was disqualified. So then for the next 20 years, nothing. So rabbis began to advertise in cattle magazines in the U.S., letting ranchers know that they were looking for a red heifer, and they'd pay a nice sum if the ranchers could find one that matched all their necessary qualifications. Now, you'd know that, Adam, if you were a subscriber to Beef Magazine.
I let my subscription lapse. I should renew.
Right. Well, again, in compliance with Numbers 19, the rabbis they're looking for a red heifer without any deformity, hasn't been used for work. It's never carried a load of any kind, not even been leaned against, and it has no brown, no black, no white hairs whatsoever. The heifer has to be entirely red, including its hooves, with no two hairs of a different color. That's a tall
Mm.
task. But then in July 2022, staff members of the Temple Institute in Jerusalem flew to a ranch in Comanche, Texas. Where is Comanche, Texas, Adam?
Boy, howdy. It's not far from here.
It's not.
I've
Yeah.
been to Comanche, Texas. Actually, quite recently, I was in Comanche, Texas. There's a lovely little French restaurant in the town
Oh,
square of Comanche, Texas, that I've discovered,
who
and I've
knew?
been to it a couple times. Of all things, a lovely French
So,
restaurant in Comanche, Texas. Yes.
okay, so you've eaten at a nice
So
French restaurant in Comanche. All I can tell you is I ate at a burger joint, but it, but it's 30
that's more
minutes
likely.
from where you're at. Say again?
That's a more likely experience in Comanche, Texas, a burger joint. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's pretty close to home. That's the point I guess I'm trying to make. But these rabbis flew to Comanche to inspect these 5 young red heifers that they were alerted to by a local rancher there. So they were there. They flew there in September 2022, and or before that, and then they saw the red heifers and they went, "We want them." And the rancher said, "You can have
Mhm.
them." And so they flew them to Israel in September 2022. That's the date I'm trying to get to. They flew them there for safekeeping, for observation. And so there's 5 red Angus heifers that are being kept in a special facility in Shiloh, which is the ancient location of the tabernacle. And they even named them. Their names are Hope, Redemption, Virtue, Rebirth, and Comfort. So,
Wow.
so the rabbis are watching these heifers, and they're waiting for them to come of age. They need to be at least 3 years of age, and they hope that at least one's going to prove to be acceptable for a sacrifice, so they can produce the mixture of the spring water and the ashes, so they can purify themselves and the future uh, builders of the temple. Now, last I heard, though, and I kind of have seen two different numbers, but the last number that I saw that was given by CBN on their Facebook page was that 2 of the 5 have been disqualified. I saw somebody said 3, but it's either 2 or 3. If that's the case, then 2 or 3 remain that have not been disqualified. But as they're waiting, and I don't know all the details of what they're waiting for, but the rabbis, in the meantime, they're developing their own herd of red Angus cattle, so that even if all 5 of these heifers are eventually disqualified, they can raise one on their own. So that's kind of where we stand a little bit. Although last year, almost exactly at this time, it was March 27th of last year, that the Jewish custodians of this herd of heifers in Shiloh, they held a one-day conference. It was by invitation only, so only a few guests were able to come to Shiloh, but they wanted to update their guests on the status of their search for the perfect unblemished heifer. And they told those who gathered there that they believed that they were very close. And
Hmm.
people who heard that became very, very excited. So I was one of those who was keeping up on it. I thought, wow, this is great. Um, Now, there's 2 names in the news that are pretty big these days: Hamas and Hezbollah. Hamas and Hezbollah. They are 2 terrorist organizations, or at least that's how they're labeled by United States government and by Israel themselves. Uh, there's still a lot of tensions over there in the land of Israel today. But Hamas and Hezbollah, about the same time, actually in advance of the March conference in 2024, they released videos. These groups did, and pressers that denounced the plans for this conference, and they acknowledged in these videos and pressers that their war against the Jewish state, which they started on October 7th, 2023, was in part over their concern that the Jews would succeed in finding a
Hmm.
suitable red heifer that would enable them to start construction on a third temple on the Temple Mount. Muslim leaders, they fear that the Jews are going to desecrate the Temple Mount, perhaps even seek to remove or destroy the Dome of the Rock, the gold-domed Muslim shrine that sits on the spot where the Second Temple in Jesus' day, the one destroyed by the Romans, stood at that time. So they're fearful that the Jews are going to knock down this shrine and desecrate what they consider to be the third holiest site of Islam. Jump in here if there's any details I'm overlooking here, Adam. But the war on Israel's southern flank that's still raging today, they still, Hamas still is holding some of the Israeli hostages,
Hmm.
and it's in the south, though it's a little bit quieter. There's still a lot of tensions within Gaza, still a lot of fighting within Gaza, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But at least most of the folks in the south of Israel are kind of going about their daily business as best they can. Things on the northern flank, Israel's northern border with Lebanon, it's much quieter than it once was. After the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, established a buffer zone along the border that was intended to stop Hezbollah, who's up there, in contrast to Hamas in Gaza. But they created this buffer zone to keep them from firing rockets into northern Israel, and they were doing that for quite some time, killing innocent civilians. And recently, the citizens of northern Israel were permitted to return to their homes after they'd been out of their homes for an 18th month absence. I can't even
Hmm.
imagine.
No, I can't imagine either.
Um, Yeah, it's awful, but the point being is that the Muslims are not happy. They're pretty angry
Hmm. Yeah.
about this effort by the Jews to find the red heifer, because they know, right? They know that if the Jews find this red heifer, that's going to be like a green light for them to rebuild the temple, the third temple.
Yeah, they know that for many Jews, not all of them have the same mindset, but for many, they're looking to that as the trigger. Basically, we got the ashes of the red heifer. Now it's time. Now there's going to be a zeal to actually make attempts, and so that's what, of course, Hamas and Hezbollah and others are concerned about.
Yeah, and there's a very vocal minority. It's still a minority, but there's still a very vocal group that wants to build that temple. There's the Temple Institute I mentioned earlier. There's the Temple Mount Faithful, and these folks they're ready to go. They would love to do it, and who knows? Maybe some wild-eyed zealot manages to smuggle some explosives up on the Temple Mount to destroy the Dome of the Rock in order to make room for the temple, the third temple. And once the red heifer's been found, and boy, that would create a scene, don't you think?
Yes, that would
Yeah,
be something else. I mean, wow. Everything else
yeah,
shoved out of the news cycle, it would be nothing but that would be the
oh
earth-shattering
my,
event of the planet. And many people don't realize that. Um, that would be the biggest possible news item ever if the Dome of the Rock would be attacked in that way.
yeah, it would motivate and unite Islamic countries around the world, and it would be devastating for the Jewish people, and it probably would create, at least as we've been saying, a regional war or potentially even World War III. Now, I suspect that this plays into the story of Daniel and Revelation, where the Antichrist is going to make a treaty with Israel in the end times. We know this from Scripture.
Yep.
And I think it's because he's going to promise protection for the Jews from Muslim nations to build their temple. He's going to say, "I'll protect you. Go ahead and do it." And he's going to have the power to do it. And the Muslim nations are not going to have the political cred or the military power to stop the Antichrist from protecting the Jews to do that. And I think that event is gonna be one of the main reasons why the world's armies will later descend on Jerusalem in what the Bible calls the Battle of Armageddon. So it's all related, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, well, the ashes, again, from a red heifer, they're needed to purify the land on which the temple's built, and they need it for the implements that they're going to be using in the temple, and they need it for the clothes that the priests wear, and to ritually cleanse the priests themselves, which they're preparing even now to serve in the third temple. And if any one of the red heifers passes, future inspection after coming of age, it's going to spark tremendous excitement for the Jews, and many of them believe that the finding of the red heifer is going to mark the coming of their Messiah. Now, of course, to us, it's heartbreaking that they've rejected Jesus as their Messiah, but
Yep.
some politically think that the Messiah is only going to come when the Jews show interest in building the temple. Others think that they should just wait entirely upon the Messiah to show um, before there's any building of of the third temple. But whichever view they have amongst themselves, in the end, it all comes down to they must find this red heifer, and that's what they're searching for. But one day there will be a temple again in Jerusalem. We read about that in the Bible, don't we?
Yes, we
And
sure do. That. Yep.
yeah, and it's going to unleash a deep hatred, if not deeper than it already is right now, and potential world conflict. And so that's why, in part, Psalm 122:6 reads, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem." So let me close with this. The satanic hate for the Jews, and that's really what it is. The hate for the
Yeah.
Jews is real and deadly. We're seeing that on U.S. soil. But here's the good news: God will prevail. No
Amen.
enemy can prevail against God and God's people. God will be the protector of his people, and that includes us as well. All right, well, let's return to our trivia question for the day. And here, I've given you the answers and the question above, but let me repeat them. So, what is the third largest city in Israel behind Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? And what is the third largest city in Israel behind Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? Jerusalem has a population of 936,000, so close to a million. If I'm to trust the numbers I saw today when I researched it on the internet. and Tel Aviv has a population of about 467,000. So who comes in third now as the third largest city? Is it Ashdod, Beersheba, Haifa, or Nazareth? And you get double points if you can put those populations of those four cities in order
Ooh.
from biggest to smallest. Okay. So what do you got?
Okay, this is a fun one. I'm
Okay.
99.99% sure that the third largest city
Okay.
in Israel is the only one that's not a biblical location, Haifa. Is that correct? It's a bona fide big city,
You are right.
skyscrapers and
You
all.
are correct. And
Yeah,
I'll even give you
it's
the population. Okay.
all right.
Haifa has a population of 282,000 folks. Number 3.
Okay. And then so between Ashdod, Beersheba, and Nazareth in order behind that,
Okay.
wow. I know that there's suburban sprawl in all of those locations. I have been
Mm-hmm.
caught in traffic in the suburban sprawl in both Nazareth and Beersheba. I've never been to Ashdod. Obviously, I've seen pictures of it. I know of it. And I know that there might be a sizable population there. That would be where Gaza oftentimes hopes to land several of their rockets because it's a populated center closest to their northern Gaza Strip border.
It
But
is.
this is just going to be a guess because I don't know for sure. I'm going to
Okay.
say behind that. Ooh, I want to say Nazareth, but I'm going to go with Beersheba. Is that
For the
am I
fourth
throwing you?
largest, right? For the
Yes.
fourth
Yeah.
largest, right? Okay. No, that's not right. Do you
Oh,
want to take another shot? You got a
is it
50-50 shot
Nazareth?
at the no.
Oh, it's Ashdod. Okay,
It
interesting.
is. Yeah. So we got
Wow.
Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, then Ashdod, and now you're down to
Okay,
the last two,
then I'm going to go with
which
Beersheba
is as number
for number
5.
5. Yep.
Correct.
Oh,
And then
okay. And then Nazareth.
that would leave Nazareth as the last. Okay. And what do you think now? Beersheba and Nazareth were the two of the smallest in my list, but how would they compare? So we got Jerusalem at 936,000, Tel Aviv at 467,000, Haifa at 282,000, Ashdod at 220,000. And where do you think Beersheba and Nazareth rate?
I'm going to go with Beersheba having 198,416 citizens.
Man, you're off by 3. No, you 209,000 though. You're close. That's a pretty good
209.
guess.
Okay.
209,000. Okay. And then
209.
Nazareth.
So Nazareth, I'll guess 178.
Yeah, too big. 83,000. It's not that big.
Oh, that's it, huh? There's a big drop off
Yeah, that's
between
it.
Beersheba and
A big
Nazareth.
drop
Okay.
off. Yeah, I don't know if I say that it's 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6 on my list. I don't. It's
On
that's
your
not
list, okay.
Nazareth is not the 6th largest city. Okay.
Right. Yeah,
There are
that
other
makes sense that it
cities
wouldn't
bigger.
be.
I just picked some
It'd be
random cities.
Tiberias
So
and yeah,
4th,
okay.
5th, right? 4th, 5th, and 6th on my list here. But yeah,
Okay.
that's not the actual.
Fair
So
enough.
okay, well, pretty good. So have you got any plans to finally eventually make it to Ashdod one day?
I'd love to just because it's
You
a
want
place in Israel.
to right? Exactly.
I mean, if you could stuff
So
me
no,
in your
you,
suitcase in May and whatever, but one day I'd love
yeah,
to see it all, of course, but
yeah, I know,
I'd
I
like to
know.
tour. I'd like to see more of Nazareth. I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
see. I mean, I'd love to visit Haifa just because, it's a big city. No biblical
Mm-hmm.
connection in my heart or anything like that.
No, there's
Just
not.
because it's a big city in Israel. But yeah, that was a good trivia question.
Okay.
I will, with my heart laid low and succeeding in my humility, say that I did get it right because I got Haifa.
You did. You did. Well, close this out, my friend.
All right. Well, we do hope that you've enjoyed this episode about the ashes of the red heifer. We can truly thank and praise God that regardless of any detail that he will unfold in history, he maintains control and sovereignty over all things great and small, and he will accomplish his will and desire. Shalom, y'all.
Shalom, y'all.